When I got married to Chaik, I thought I had walked into a beautiful fairy tale. He was charming, intelligent, and made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. But I never expected that the ugliest battle I would ever fight wouldn't be with my enemies, but with my own family. For 2 years, I carried the heavy cross of being a barren woman in silence. I tolerated the insults, the midnight prayers thrown at me like curses, and the accusing eyes of a father-in-law who believed my womb was cursed. They said I was a witch, sent to destroy their lineage. But the truth always finds its voice, and when the DNA results came out, his voice went silent forever. Let me take you back to where it all began, where love turned into pain, and truth became both a sword and a shield. I met Chaik in university during our final year. He was everything I had prayed for, a God-fearing man, the firstborn son of a respected family in Enugu, and a future civil engineer with big dreams. We dated for just 8 months before he proposed. It was fast, but we felt ready. His mother was warm and welcoming during the introduction. She hugged me tightly and told me I reminded her of herself when she was younger. But the first time I met Pa Anazi, Chaik's father, something in his eyes unsettled me. He looked me up and down like I was being inspected. Like I was not enough. Still, I brushed it off as nerves. After our traditional wedding, we moved into the boys' quarters of Chaik's family compound while we saved up to build our own home. That was my first mistake. Living under the same roof as my in-laws became a daily test of patience, humility, and emotional strength. For the first few months, everything was peaceful. Mama Anazi would often sit with me in the evening, showing me how to cook certain family recipes. But once the first year passed without a pregnancy, everything changed. Pa Anazi stopped speaking to me directly. He would send messages through Chaik or his wife. He started calling me a waste of bride price when he didn't know I could hear. And once, I overheard him mutter to a neighbor during a family function, "This one doesn't have a womb." My son married a beautiful calabash with no seed. I cried silently in the bathroom that night, my mouth covered so no one would hear me break. We started visiting different hospitals and fertility clinics. Every test showed the same result: I was fine. My womb was healthy. There were no blockages or abnormalities. In fact, one gynecologist said my fertility levels were textbook perfect. But each time we asked Chaik to go for his own tests, he'd delay it with excuses: work, travel, tiredness. I didn't want to pressure him, so I kept believing it was just stress or God's timing. Meanwhile, the attacks intensified. One afternoon, while I was cooking in the kitchen, Pa Anazi barged in with a Bible and a jug of what looked like river water. "I had a dream last night," he said, his eyes wild. "A woman with a snake's tongue stood between you and my son. It is you. The Spirit has confirmed it." I was stunned. He poured the water over my head, chanting in Igbo, "Let every demon flee." I was shaking, soaked, and humiliated. Mama just watched silently from the corridor, biting her lips but saying nothing. That night, I begged Chaik to let us leave the compound and rent a place. He sighed. "You know how Papa is. He's just old-fashioned. He believes things like this. Let's be patient." "But Chaik, it's getting dangerous." He called me a witch. He shook his head. "I just need more time to finish repaying that loan. I promise, we'll leave soon." The second year into our marriage, Chaik finally agreed to do a semen analysis. He came home with the envelope in his hand, looking defeated. I opened it eagerly. 0 sperm count. My heart sank, not because of the result, but because I knew what this meant in our society. A man's infertility is always a woman's shame. I braced myself for his father's wrath. But surprisingly, Chaik didn't tell anyone. Instead, he turned cold. Distant. As if I had caused his condition. He started coming home late, barely speaking to me. And the worst part? He allowed the false accusations from his father to continue unchecked. "I married you out of love," I told him one night. But love without truth is a prison. And I was slowly dying in that prison. Things hit the worst when a local prophet came to the compound, claiming he had a message from God. Pa Anazi clapped his hands triumphantly when the prophet declared, "The womb in this house is locked by ancestral spirits. The daughter-in-law must go through cleansing or leave the home." Cleansing? They wanted to strip me naked, pour concoctions on my body, and have me confess to sins I didn't commit, all in the name of deliverance. I said no. I walked out that night and went to stay with my cousin in Owerri. 3 weeks later, I heard that Chike had taken in a young girl from his office. They said she was now helping him heal, whatever that meant. I wept. For days, I wept. But one morning, I rose with fire in my bones. I contacted a lawyer, then a counselor. I started therapy. I found strength in my wounds. I filed for separation, and to my shock, Chike didn't fight it. Maybe he had already replaced me. Maybe he thought I would go quietly and disappear. But God had other plans. A year later, news broke in town that Chike's new woman had given birth to twin boys. The village buzzed with celebration. Pa Anazi slaughtered a goat and held a naming ceremony, declaring, "My lineage continues." But something strange happened. After just 3 months, the new mother disappeared with the babies. Gone. Vanished. Chike tried to file a police report, but then he received a letter from a lawyer. She had filed for child support and attached something else. A court-ordered DNA test. And the results? Chike was not the father. When the results became public, the same people who had once mocked me were whispering in shame. But the real blow came when Pa Anazi collapsed on the veranda after reading the paper himself. His voice, once loud and judgmental, never returned to full strength after that stroke. The same tongue that called me a witch couldn't utter a single insult again. They tried to reach me. Letters. Phone calls. Apologies from Chike's mother. But I had already started a new life, one where I was no longer waiting for validation from those who never deserved my presence. And as for children? 3 years later, I adopted a beautiful baby girl abandoned at the church steps. Her name is Nkemdalim, which means what is mine stays with me. She is the joy of my life. The next time someone calls a woman a witch for not conceiving, remember, infertility wears many faces. And silence doesn't mean guilt, it sometimes means dignity. Because the truth doesn't need noise to shake the world. Months after the DNA scandal erupted, I was living peacefully in Akka with my daughter, Nkemdalim. I had opened a small boutique selling African-inspired clothing and fabrics. Business was steady, and more importantly, my soul was quiet. I no longer flinched when someone asked me about marriage or children. My scars had become my armor. One rainy morning, as I arranged fabrics at the front of my shop, a shadow appeared in my doorway. It was Mama Anazi. She looked older, grayer hair, thinner cheeks, and the weight of regret sagging on her shoulders. Her eyes welled up the moment she saw Nkemdalim playing near the mirror. "Chinique," she whispered. "She's so beautiful." "You named her Nkemdalim?" I nodded silently. She took a slow step forward and handed me a small folded piece of paper. I opened it. It was a handwritten note, clearly trembling and shaky in style. I recognized the handwriting. Pa Anazi. I judged you wrongly. I'm sorry. May God forgive me. I blinked back tears, but my heart didn't move. Mama, why are you here? She looked down in shame. Chike is not doing well. After that woman ran away with the twins, he's not been the same. He drinks. He lost his job. And his father, he doesn't speak much. He just stares out the window these days. He wants to see you. Just once. I sighed deeply. The wounds were still fresh. Mama, they wanted to bathe me in river water and call it cleansing. They mocked me. humiliated me. And now, because life dealt them a hard lesson, they want peace? She broke down in tears. I know we failed you. But bitterness will not heal us. I didn't respond. That night, I sat up staring at the ceiling. My daughter lay peacefully beside me, her tiny chest rising and falling in rhythm. Could I forgive them? Would it heal me, or would it reopen old scars? The next morning, I took a decision. I arrived in Enugu unannounced. The compound had changed. The paint was peeling, the front yard overgrown. I walked into the parlor and found Pa Anazi in his wheelchair, his face hollow and distant. His eyes slowly turned to me. He recognized me immediately. His lips trembled, but no words came. Instead, tears slid down his cheeks. I stood silently. No apologies. No vengeance. Just silence. Then I took Nkemdalem's hand, stepped closer, and said softly, "This is the child you once claimed my womb would never carry." His fingers shook. I bent slightly, looked into his eyes, and whispered, "But she's mine." Because motherhood is more than childbirth. It's love, sacrifice, and truth. I turned around and left without looking back. 3 months after visiting my in-laws and showing them Nkemdalem, I received a letter through courier. It was from Chike. He wanted to meet. At first, I ignored it. I had already turned the page. But part of me needed closure, not for him, but for myself. I needed to know why. Why he chose silence. Why he let me bleed alone while standing beside the very people who broke me. We agreed to meet at a quiet cafe just outside Enugu. He looked worn, his once polished appearance replaced by a rugged beard, creased clothes, and tired eyes. "Amaka," he started, his voice barely above a whisper, "I failed you." I didn't speak. He continued, "I was ashamed, not of you, but of myself. When I saw that test result, I felt like less of a man. I thought if I stayed silent, maybe people would blame you and not look at me too closely. But I never imagined it would go that far. I let Papa treat you like dirt." Tears welled in his eyes. "And now I have nothing. No children. No wife. No peace." I looked at him, my heart calm. "Do you know what the worst part was? It wasn't your father pouring water on my head. It wasn't the prophet screaming that I was a snake. It was you, watching me suffer and choosing silence. That silence cut deeper than any insult." He nodded, defeated. "I didn't come here for apologies," I said, rising to my feet. "I came to let you know, I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace." I walked away, leaving him seated, still clutching his cup like a man lost in a storm of his own making. 2 weeks later, I was invited to speak at a local women's seminar in Awka. The topic? Healing after shame. I told my story, not as a victim, but as a survivor. After the event, several women approached me. One held my hands tightly, her eyes glistening. "Thank you for speaking," she said. "I've been called barren for 7 years. But today, I feel seen." And just like that, my pain became purpose. I began organizing monthly support groups for women who had been shamed for infertility, divorce, or childlessness. We met, we cried, we healed together. Slowly, my boutique expanded to include handmade crafts by these women, helping them regain dignity and financial independence. Nkemdalem would sit by the sewing table, coloring in notebooks, unaware of the revolution her existence had started. Every time I looked at her, I was reminded, motherhood is not always biological. Sometimes, it's a seed of hope planted in broken ground. Sometimes, the child you nurture is not just a baby, but a new beginning. It had been nearly 2 years since I last stepped foot in Enugu. The silence from Chike's family had stretched into stillness, and I thought the story had finally ended. But life has a strange way of testing whether your healing is real or simply patched up. One Saturday morning, I received a call from Mama Anazi. "Amaka, please," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "It's your father-in-law. He's not going to last much longer. He keeps muttering your name. Please come." I stared at the phone for a long time. I thought about how many nights I had cried, how many times I had swallowed my pride, endured humiliation, and begged to be seen as more than a womb. And now, in his final days, he remembered me. I wasn't sure whether to feel honored or insulted. But deep in my heart, I realized something. This wasn't about him. It was about me. About choosing who I wanted to be in the end. So I went. He was lying in his bed, frail and barely conscious. The once proud man who had called me a witch now had tubes in his nose and needed help to turn over. He couldn't speak anymore, not clearly. But when he saw me, his eyes widened with something between recognition and shame. I stepped closer, holding Kemdalim's small hand in mine. She smiled at him, innocent and unbothered by history. I sat down beside him. "I came, not for your peace, but for mine," I said gently. He blinked slowly, tears forming at the edges. I placed Nkem's hand in his. "You called me a witch. You said I was the reason your lineage would end. But this child? This child carries the strength you tried to crush in me. She is joy. She is purpose. And though she may not carry your blood, she carries something far greater, grace." His lips moved. Barely audible. But I could read it in his eyes. "I'm sorry." For the first time in years, I allowed myself to cry in front of him. Not because I needed his apology, but because I no longer needed his validation. I rose, kissed Nkem on the forehead, and turned to leave. As I reached the door, Mama Anazi called after me. "Amaka, wait." I turned. She approached slowly, handing me a small wooden box. "He left this for you," she said. Inside was a folded letter and an old photo from our wedding day. In the letter, written in shaky but legible writing, he had written, "If I could go back, I would choose to love you instead of judge you. I now know the womb is not where legacy begins, it's in the heart. And yours was the strongest of all." In a world that often defines women by what they can produce, we forget to honor who they truly are. Not every story ends with a child. Not every wound is visible. And not every apology comes in time. But healing comes when we choose ourselves. So if you've ever been shamed for what you couldn't give, remember this. You are enough. Just as you are. And sometimes, the loudest vindication is silence.